Good morning. Welcome to episode 19 of Tea, Coffee, and Torah. I am so glad you're with me this morning. It is a cold and chilly morning. I think we are right around, it said like 45 degrees, but I think maybe we're a little warmer than that. The sun definitely helps. I am working on an inside studio. It's not set up yet, so we are still here on the patio, and it is absolutely gorgeous. I wanted to do a little bit of something different today before we get into the topics that we've been discussing of the high places. As you know, I am finished with my book, and I've sent it out for like some beta testing. And I've had some mixed reviews on my preface. And that is because it's a little strong. It comes off, I'm trying to really capture the situation we're in America today, and not just America, but I think many nations find themselves in this situation. So I'm going to start off this morning by reading the first paragraph of the preface of my new book. And my question is, I would love your feedback. And does it resonate with you? Is it something that you can't relate to? Please enter your comments below, because I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I would love to have your feedback. I don't know unless you guys share your thoughts with me. So I'm going to just go ahead and delve in and read the first paragraph of my forthcoming book, Does Jesus Exist? And this is the preface. It says, we sleep to the sound our silence allows. Huge corporations are criminal enterprises now. Corporations incite division. Nonprofits create violent riots. They lower property values, then private equity buys up the city. No rule of law exists to forbid privatization of the city's police force. They use government to mandate policies that enforce their products on us, whether we want them or not. My body is not my choice. They pay for tainted scientific research, which benefits their balance sheet. Corporations and governments strategize to reduce evidence of our existence, but ignores leaders who reserve luxury for their grand estates while leaving their footprints flying all over global space. They are too big to fail. They are the monopoly. We are in misery while they consider citizens the enemy. Does America have any means to resist it? Or do we bury our minds in aimless work, silently sleeping the night away? So I'm going to read parts of this each morning as we do this, because I would love to have your feedback. I'm not doing it all at once just because it is a lot at once, and I really want to keep going through this material. Please drop your comments below. I would love to have your feedback. Does it resonate with you? Could it be worded better? Any comments, any suggestions, I'm open. I have a small frame of a few days to make any corrections or updates before we go forward. As you can tell, I am kind of battling with the sun. It's at a little bit of a higher plane post-equinox, and so I am having to adjust a little bit. But we're going to cover this material even if the sun's in my face here this morning. So grab your cup of joe and join me. I wanted to do a little bit of a recap regarding Israel's tabernacle. It had been in Shiloh. So let's start with the beginning. According to the chronology, and this is based on years of research that I've done, Israel would have come into Canaan right at 1508 BCE. This is when the Canaan conquest would have happened. Again, is right around 1508. And then, as you can tell, I'm playing with the sun here. And then, according to rabbinic chronology, and as I mentioned last session, I'm no fan of rabbinic chronology. There's too many contradictions, too much deleting of what we know from no history. But there is a one reference that I believe could have been based on ancient sources, where it says that the tabernacle in Shiloh existed for 369 years. This means that from the time that it was erected at Shechem, we assume it was erected at Shechem when they first came into the land, before it was transferred to Shiloh, would probably have been about 11 years. And it was set up specifically in Mount Ephraim. So originally Shechem was in Mount Ephraim, part of Ephraim, but then it was moved south to Shiloh. Now, for Shiloh, it states that Shiloh was between, it was like on this road between Bethel and between Shechem. So it was between these two cities. And, so it would have been a place that Israel could have easily traveled. If you might recall, during the days of Jacob, Bethel was a place, whether it existed as a high place in his time or not, but very quickly it became a high place where Israel worshiped during the Judges era and throughout the monarchy. You also find that it states specifically that Joshua set up the tabernacle at Shiloh in Joshua 18:1. So this is after the time, of course, Moses never entered the land. So this tabernacle would have existed there at Shiloh for a very long time period, over 300 years. But what we find is that the tabernacle is destroyed, very likely, in the battle with the Philistines. You know, when we read that Israel, or rather that Eli's sons took the Ark of the Covenant into battle, you know, we kind of assume that it was only the Ark of the Covenant that they took into the battle and that the tabernacle stayed at Shiloh and it did not travel. But remember, the tabernacle was a very portable unit, and it is very possible that the tabernacle traveled with the Ark of the Covenant and Israel into battle. That is actually what would have happened during the Exodus period, when the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant, all of that traveled with Israel on her journeys in battles throughout the wilderness period. So it's not, it is not out of the question that the tabernacle would have traveled with them into battle. But, of course, we find that the Ark of the Covenant is captured. And it is very possible. There is, I would say, circumstantial evidence to say that even the tabernacle itself, or portions of that tabernacle, could even have been destroyed in battle, because it talks about Yahweh forsaking this tabernacle, about him rejecting it, and about it being delivered into captivity. So if you look at Psalms 78, verse 60, this is a psalm of Asaph. It says, he forsook both the place and the tabernacle at Shiloh. It says they were delivered into captivity. So for me, this is a circumstantial text. And then it adds to this in verse 64 that the priests fell by the sword. So this indicates that the priests were a part of this battle that Israel fought against the Philistines. Many of them were slaughtered, not just Hophni and Phinehas. When somebody comes against your land, everybody really has to stand up to defend it. But then I want to also bring attention to something, because one of the criticisms that you have regarding the biblical text, and I'm going to have to shelter my eyes here a little bit, is that the tabernacle and later temple all are structured similarly to the known temples in Egypt, and not just Egypt, but also in Syria. Of course, Tel El-Rod follows this temple complex and is very much, they are all kind of, you know, they have this inner holy place, they have an outer courtyard. And of course the temple had a long room, but where Tel El-Rod had a broad room. So the question is, why are they all so similar? Well, the Psalm of Asaph in Psalm 78, verse 69 says something very interesting. It says that Yahweh's sanctuary was made like the high places of the earth. So a lot of times we read this and we say, wait a minute. The tabernacle in the wilderness was constructed according to a plan that showed similarities with Egyptian temples and with Syrian temples. And we say, wait a minute, that's pagan. This is foreign influence. This is outside influence. Well, I think we have to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because of the fact that, there you can have a structure that is a normal building practice. It's a standard building practice. But then what you actually do with that building practice, what you do inside of it, and the things that you can teach can be very, very different. So I would just exercise a little bit of caution with that. We will delve into this a little bit deeper as time goes on. The other thing that I wanted to point out was this time period. The tabernacle was destroyed. The tabernacle, Ark of the Covenant, captured in 1128 BCE under the high priest, or the acting priest Eli. And then you find that there is a gap of 156 years until there is a centralized location for Israel to worship again. And that centralized location occurs, of course, in Jerusalem with the building of Solomon's temple in 972 BCE. That's when it's finished, when the construction is finished. So Israel went for 156 years without an official centralized place of worship. It mentions in Judges 29:19, when Shiloh was still an active holy site, it says that there was a yearly feast held there. And that, there's indications that the tribes would have come. When Joshua distributes the land throughout the book of Joshua and even in the book of Judges, you find that Israel comes to Shiloh to do all their administrative business, to conduct the affairs of state during the Judges period. But then for this 156 period, this gap, and it's not just the biblical chronology that supports this, but it's archaeology. It's at this very time period that we find throughout Israel's territory, high places pop up everywhere. Bethel, of course, there's Dan, the one that's mentioned in Judges. You also have Gilgal. You have high places at Samuel sets up a high place in his hometown of Ramah, which would have been in Mount Ephraim. So you find that during this 156-year period, what would have been a very centralized cultic institution all of a sudden becomes very localized. It becomes very germane to that local populations. And yes, Levitical priests very likely served in those high places, but they served to Yahweh. Originally there was not the conflation with all the pagan deities. So I just think that when we read through this text, having that historical context should really bear in mind and help us have that understanding before we progress forward. So I'm going to pretty much leave you with that for today. I do want to add that remember that during this 156-year time period where there was not a active cultic site as far as a place where Yahweh says he places his name, we do find that Mizpah of Benjamin, and there was many Mizpahs, many cities named Mizpah, so it's really careful. You have to be careful to designate this as Mizpah of Benjamin. This site does become the defunct capital of Israel for this 156-year time period. Saul is inaugurated. So you have one release year where Israel comes and meets, and Saul is chosen, but he's not yet inaugurated. You find that there's about 7 years that pass. And then at another release year, when Israel convenes at Mizpah, you find that is when Saul is installed. But you don't find any mention to a tabernacle associated during this time period. It's as though the tabernacle has been destroyed. It doesn't exist until we have Solomon's temple. And then we'll come to that a little bit later. But then you find that as the temple becomes popular, as the Levites are then reinstitutionalized, they are reorganized from the countryside to begin functioning along a centric cultic site, you find that there are changes. It even states in Chronicles that even before David became king, that he and Samuel worked to organize the kingdom and how that kingdom would work under the monarchy. I mean, things had been very fragmented for almost 2 centuries. So it becomes, keeping all this history in mind just helps us to better understand the text when we read it. And having that information in our background, kind of a feather in your cap, helps us to then better understand what we're reading and the history that comes from that. So that's where I'm going to leave you today. I hope you have a fantastic day, and join me next time. I'm going to be reading more from my preface, and then I'm also going to be reading certain excerpts from my book, and I'm going to be posting them on Facebook as well. So I hope you'll follow along and join in the discussion. Thank you so much.